Greetings, you curiouser and curiouser Herle Burly-ites. Today's episode is a special live podcast recorded on September 18th with the Canadian Club in Ottawa. So I'm happy to say you're about to be treated to some pretty fancy camera work that far exceeds a Zoom room. Our guest, the Honourable David Eby, Premier of British Columbia. Premier Eby became leader of the BC NDP and the province's 37th Premier in 2022. Before entering politics, he was a human rights lawyer and executive director of the BC Civil Liberties Association. First elected as MLA for Vancouver Point Grey in 2013, he previously held cabinet roles including Attorney General and Minister responsible for housing. Premier Eby joined me to talk about his pitch to look west for major resource projects, the experience of working with Prime Minister Carney's government and the previous one as well, and a bit of BC politics too. I hope you enjoy it. So, Premier Eby, it's great to have you here. Great to have you on the Herle Burly podcast, as well as here at the Canadian Club in Ottawa. So, look west is an interesting way of starting at things because the British Columbians I know chafe at being lumped in with the West. You know, they think the West has come to be defined in Canada as the prairies. Prairie provinces, so they don't like this notion that there's a Western Canada that BC is part of.
You know, I hear that, David, and it's interesting because when we say look west in British Columbia, we're saying it to the rest of the country, including Alberta. You know, I heard the Prime Minister say that Connor McDavid, you know, is looking around. We're telling him to look west.
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk to Francesco about that. So we're really sending the message right across the country, look west, because we truly believe, I truly believe, especially when I look at the projects we're bringing forward federally, that if we're going to drive prosperity, if we're going to create the economic opportunity for Canadians, the good paying jobs, the tax revenues to fund the social programs that we all value, British Columbia is going to lead the way going forward.
Awesome. Okay. So before we get into the issues, I'd just like people to learn a little bit about you. You actually grew up in Ontario, am I right?
That's right. And just let me say what a relief it is to drop the BC accent for an evening. It is. I have a dialect coach, and I think it's a scam. It's just old Beachcomber episodes. But yeah, I grew up in Kitchener, just down the road, and regularly people say, oh, it must have been great growing up in Kingston, the tragically hip. No, I grew up in Kitchener, and you know what, part of my heart is still here. My family is here, and lots of connection. I went to law school in Nova Scotia, spent a bunch of time in Halifax as a result, and so I've seen different parts of the country, but when I was choosing where did I want to raise my family or start a family, and where did I want to build my career, I ended up choosing British Columbia, and I'm so glad, like a lot of people, and very grateful for the welcome that British Columbia has provided me and the opportunities for myself and for my kids, and it's just it's a great place to be. And the thing that I think I've really appreciated about British Columbia is its real openness and welcoming to people who choose British Columbia as a home, and as a result, you know, it has to me that kind of vibrant feel. It's got an incredible connection to Asia and the Asia Pacific. It has a feeling still of newness, but coupled with incredible history when you talk about the Indigenous history of the province and its current expression by First Nations in the province. And so I can't say enough amazing things about British Columbia, but I do truly feel that Team Canada spirit based on my background. And it's partly why I feel a responsibility as the Premier of the province when we have these opportunities, when we see, and maybe we'll be able to get into more specificity about them, but when we see projects that can bring billions of dollars of revenue into Canada, that can help us diversify our markets, that can respond to the threat of Trump, and we know that we can play that role for all Canadians, we feel an extra responsibility to do it.
Yeah. Okay. What was life like growing up, though, in Kitchener? Kind of what would your folks do?
So my mom was a teacher and became a principal. And my dad was a lawyer and really kind of full service, small town lawyer kind of situation. I remember one time he got paid by a client in just big buckets of honey. To give you some perspective, we ate honey on toast for a long time. There were 4 kids in our family. It was a wonderful and, in hindsight, totally idyllic suburban growing up. Lots of good pals in the neighborhood, and not a lot to worry about. And in hindsight, I recognize what an incredibly privileged opportunity that was as a kid. And I think, when I came out west, I saw this opportunity. But one of my first stops when I came out west for the first time was the downtown east side of Vancouver, where I was in going to first year law school. It was the summer before, and I was like going to law school because I wanted to do something human rights work, or I didn't totally know. And then I was in the downtown east side, and I was like, man, how can this exist? Like, I didn't have any exposure to this as a Canadian reality growing up. And it really drove me through law school, and it's where I ended up working as a result. But it was a great growing up, and it was that spirit of fairness instilled by my mom, who was a teacher, that really informed wanting to do better for the people who are struggling in the downtown east side around housing issues, and that I think still informs a lot of how I make decisions today as Premier.
All right, thank you. So the following is a message of appreciation from our presenting sponsor, TELUS. But if you stick around till the end, there's a short bonus appreciation coming from yours truly. I'm sure you all remember TELUS spent quite a bit of time here talking about the CRTC's decision to allow wholesale fiber access. About a month and a half ago, the government upheld that decision, declining to intervene. So TELUS just wants to use the space today to shout out their appreciation and give some thanks to Cabinet, and in particular Industry Minister Joly, who took the time to seriously consider the facts and patiently listen to the multitude of stakeholders weighing in on this decision over the past several months. To Prime Minister Carney, who recently gave a speech underscoring how the decision is going to reduce broadband costs and enhance affordability for Canadian families. And to our Herle Burly guest this week, Premier David Eby, for his strong advocacy to the federal government, arguing that the removal of interprovincial trade barriers would build a stronger economy across the entire country, and urging Canada to see BC as a leading economic engine. Again, TELUS just wants to recognize this important work and underline the benefits, how it's going to spur real competition across the country in wireline and drive down prices for Canadians. Precisely what's happened in Ontario and Quebec since TELUS entered those markets 2 years ago. Now, that bonus appreciation for me that I teased off the top. According to my official and mostly accurate podcast record keeping, this is the 300th ad space message from TELUS since they became presenting sponsor of our shows about 6 years ago. So cheers to you, TELUS, for getting in on the Herle Burly early, and for your support in keeping the discussions and debates going. So what was the trigger point when you were working in Vancouver that made you decide to go into elected politics?
Yeah, that's a key turning point for me, because I went to law school actually to sue politicians, not to become a politician. It was kind of at a time like the gay marriage challenge at the Supreme Court of Canada, the Halpern case had happened, and it was like this time when the charter, it was like, wow, and there were all these conservative governments across the country. And to me, it was like, if you wanted to make a difference for people, you had to go to court, you had to sue governments. And so it was like when I was moving out west, and it was not, I had no aspirations of going into politics, just the opposite. And there was this issue in the downtown east side, and the issue was that the city had a bylaw. It's called the Standards of Maintenance Bylaw, technical name. But basically it meant that they could go into substandard housing, they could do repairs to the buildings, and then they could bill it back to the property owner through the property tax system. And so I was spending all my days advocating for people so that buildings would be repaired so they wouldn't be condemned, so that the people who lived in the buildings wouldn't be evicted to the street. And it appeared to me and to a lot of people at the time that if the city just used this bylaw, they could do the repairs and put us all out of work and solve the problem. And so we went to City Hall again and again and again and said, you got to use this bylaw, and I guess we could have used GT strategies. But anyway, I didn't understand what they were saying to me. We'll look at it, whatever. But a little plug. But the frustration I had was that these elected officials, they'd say, well, that sounds interesting. And then they turn around to the staff and they say, can we do this? And the staff would say, oh, I don't think so. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. I was like a very confident young man. I mentioned my upbringing. And I said, well, if they're not going to do it, then I'm going to run for city council, and I'm going to do it. And so I ran for nomination for city council with a new political party then at the time called Vision Vancouver. And side note that Minister Gregor Robertson was the mayor of that party. We put together a hardscrabble team of activists and organizers, and we worked super hard, and we signed up a ton of people, and guess what happened? We lost. That's right, we lost. But it was a huge introduction to politics, and although I wasn't successful in the nomination, the party adopted the policy and began doing that work after they were elected, and I was like, holy cow. I spent a month on that campaign and had an impact on city policy. This politics thing is quite a powerful tool for change. That's very naive. And as a result, I was more open to it. And once you run once, if any of you have had this experience, people call you all the time. There are elections all the time. They need people to run for them everywhere. And they say, can you run here? Can you run there? And finally, I got the call to run against the new leader of the then BC Liberal Party in BC, and was successful on the second occasion against her. But yeah, that's what sucked me in, was this one issue and just this frustration with politicians that didn't feel they had the agency to make a meaningful change for people, and that was what gave me the juice to do it.
Well, that's interesting, because the downtown east side is still in tough shape, right?
Man, synthetic opioids have done a number, it's gone through these cycles, right? At first, it's like heroin, oh man, heroin's, alcohol. Alcohol's the great evil, and then it was heroin. It was like, oh my God, we've never seen it as bad as heroin. And then it was crack cocaine, it was the crack epidemic. Then it was crystal meth, and it was like, man, things can't get worse. And then it was synthetic opioids, fentanyl, carfentanil, and now I don't know what's next, but man, seriously bad news. Brain injuries from repeated resuscitations, people struggling with addictions that are so profoundly addicted they are barely connected with reality, and then compounding with the mental health issues that they already had. It's not in good shape, and it remains for me an issue that we have to address. That for myself, it's crucially important. But I think just the fact that this exists in Canada, I think it's a Canadian issue. And
so where's your head at it right now? Because I mean, you took a compassionate approach to the issue of drug addiction, and it was very controversial. There were times in the last couple of years where I thought that Pierre Poilievre was running against you more than he was running against Justin Trudeau. The way he was focusing on your approach to managing the opioid epidemic in Vancouver. What do you think now? What have you learned from that whole process of trying to deal with it? And what do you think is the best approach?
Yeah, well, when I was working in the neighborhood, working with people struggling with addiction, I watched as people spent the majority of their time engaged in hiding from the police, committing minor crimes to access drugs, very little focus on either recovery from addiction or healthcare or anything else. And like many people, I was like, okay, the answer here is if we decriminalize drugs and people don't spend all their time doing this, and we're able to get people connected with medical professionals instead of predatory drug dealers, we're going to be able to help them turn their lives around. And for many people, that was true. I think when we deployed decriminalization, which started under Premier Horgan and began formally when I became Premier, and we did it with the support of the chiefs of police, I think we were all hoping that that would be the reality. What was the reality was that some people indeed did benefit, but there was a cohort of people, and there is a cohort of people who are so addicted, so struggling, that it became a structure of permission We had people using drugs openly in the streets. We had people using drugs in the Tim Hortons. We had people using drugs on the bus. And the police were like, well, we have a smoking bylaw, but I'm not totally sure that. And so there weren't tools available to set up those structures. And as a result, and very quickly, public confidence in that approach tanked, and understandably so. I mean, we just want to take the bus. I just want to get a coffee at Tim Hortons. What the hell is going on here? And so this is the challenge with the opioid epidemic. You see people dying. We have these horrific numbers of deaths. We need to address them. We have to try different things. Some of them will be successful. This one wasn't. And we have to refine the policy. And I've been very grateful for the tolerance of a broad number of British Columbians who are like, yeah, you have to try these things. And when they're not working, we give you permission to change course without banishing you to opposition forever. And so we don't take that for granted. We take it very seriously. We need safe streets. We need safe neighborhoods and playgrounds and Tim Hortonses and everything else. But we also need a compassionate and understanding approach to people struggling with addiction.
So, if you're attuned to the political zeitgeist, you might be aware of a new national hindrance: process. Public servants have been sternly warned by the new clerk of the Privy Council that overweening process is the enemy of progress, that the business of government, and indeed the business of business, can suffocate under the inertia of endlessly proliferating rules and regulations and the blossoming bureaucracy government creates to enforce them. And that, in these perilous times, we cannot afford such nonsense. Our sponsor, CN, agrees and applauds, and would respectfully like to call attention to a tangle of regulations imposed on the railway industry by the previous government. It is the very picture of process impeding progress. These rules, perhaps well-intentioned, were meant to address the management of worker fatigue in rail operations. All they did, though, was get between the railways and their unions, adding another layer to existing collective agreements, which already contained agreed-upon workable standards. These government interventions increased administrative complexity and costs. They reduced the availability of trained workers. They obliged CN to expand its train crew workforce by 12 to 15%. In other words, these new government-imposed processes drove up costs and drove down efficiency. And in a competitive marketplace, because that's where railways operate, overhead increases are always passed on and eventually make their way down to the consumer. Let me repeat, shift limits and worker fatigue were subjects that had already been negotiated between CN and its unions, both of which, let's face it, have considerable experience with the subject. The government then stepped in to fix a problem that didn't exist, resulting not only in higher costs, but curtailed overtime and income for rail crews. CN respectfully suggests that in the spirit of the times, Ottawa might consider getting out of the way and letting Canada's railways and railroaders get the job done. More on this issue in the days to come. This stuff is serious. All right, let's get to the economy, because that's why you're here. And this is quite a unique thing you're doing here in Ottawa right now, bringing your cabinet members and staff, and you're doing a full court press. You met with the Prime Minister last night, meeting with ministers all day today. What's the purpose of this offensive, and what's your pitch?
So it's a pretty straightforward.
If you thought you were going to get away without a speech, you're not. You have to give a little speech.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward message, and I want to say this sort of with deference to my colleagues across the country. Everybody's doing the best they can with the hand they've been dealt in different provinces. We're all working together in terms of this incredible threat we face from the south of us, from the president right now. I was in Washington, D.C. With the premiers, and we had a meeting with some staff, I would say a couple levels down from the president, and a number of Republicans. And my eyes were opened. This was kind of at the peak of the 51st state rhetoric, and Premier Fury, to his credit, asked the staff and was like, listen, the president's saying all this 51st state stuff, but that's just like for the base, right? He's not serious about that, is he? And they said, of course he is serious. Like, if you guys want to deal with this trade issue, you just need to become the 51st state, and just straight up. And among other alarming comments. And I realized two things. One was the depth of the president's hold on everybody. the Republican electeds were like, we'd say, well, what is the president, where is he hoping to go on this? Well, that depends on what the president wants to do. Well, what's the president's vision for that? Well, the president will tell you what his vision is, and that's what it is. And so the depth of the hold on the electeds, but also the sort of the seriousness of the approach to Canada and how they were approaching their relationship with us and the threat to our economy and our sovereignty. And so that moment was quite transformational for me. And especially, kind of being hopeful, well, maybe we could get a softwood lumber deal. Maybe we could be able to, maybe with a different president, he wants to reopen things, maybe there's a way for us to leverage this that'll get some benefit for Canada, there'll be some cost, but we can find a path forward. It was like, wow, we need to use every tool possible to diversify our markets. We need to do everything we can to stand on our own 2 feet, to not be dependent on the United States, to build up our sovereignty, because this is no joke. And I took that back to my colleagues, and I think every premier that was in that room took that back. And we've had different approaches, and I don't critique other premiers for their approaches. Some are, we got to constructively engage. Some are, we got to not buy American alcohol, that's us. And we got to not go to the US. It's been different approaches, but I think we all feel that the enormity of the challenge ahead of us, given how closely we're tied, and the enormity of the importance of doing this work. So all of that was precursor to tell you that in BC, we know as the gateway to roughly 2/3 of the world's population through Asia, that Saskatchewan potash, canola, key products from Alberta, including agricultural products, petroleum products, resource products, and products from Manitoba come through our ports. We have a crucial role to play to make sure that those goods get to market. We need to support getting goods to international markets through the ports, but also for our province, when we have incredible mineral resources that we know the world needs, critical metals and minerals. I saw a couple of the folks from Defense Metals earlier. These are the critical metals that are needed for the defense industry and for these super magnets that are used around the world for electric engines and other things that China has an iron grip on. And we have those things in BC, but not only do we have them, because I think all provinces could point, we have some here, we have the projects with proponents, companies, that are ready to go, that are in environmental assessment, or they're raising money, or they're working with nations on accommodation, and we can actually push them forward. So I feel that responsibility. All of my colleagues feel that responsibility and weight to push this forward. And the second piece is our country and our province and all of the provinces need resources to do the work that we have to do. And we have to do this work to generate the revenues to be able to pay for the work we have to do. And that could be an aging population that needs health care. That could be the defense spending commitments that the government's making. But if we don't develop the resources, we don't have the revenues to pay for the things that we need to do. And so for those two reasons, we're pushing really hard in BC. That's been my message to the Prime Minister, is we're not bringing a proposal to you to dig a tunnel under the 401 that's going to cost $60 billion plus. We are bringing to you private sector projects that will generate $60 billion for our province and for the country. And that is a significant difference, and it's a difference that I want to see so bright and clear in the minds of federal decision makers as they make their major projects lists.
Okay, so help me understand a few of these things. Let's start with LNG. The previous government, well, the Justin Trudeau government, told us that there was no market for LNG, that there was no demand for Canadian LNG. And now we are celebrating our exports of LNG and hoping to have more exports of LNG. So were they wrong, or were they gaslighting us? It's hard not to feel like we've just wasted quite a few years on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, for me, and I come from a party that's always a bit torn when it comes to resource development. We support the resource development. We want it done. but we're also passionate environmentalists and concerned about climate change and protecting wild spaces and those other things as well. And so I can empathize with those tensions that are pulling in different directions. But what we're trying to build in the country and what we're trying to build for ourselves in the province is a durable and ongoing support for resource development by incorporating what we feel are New Democrat values, but that are universal Canadian values into that work. So when we're doing LNG, that we're requiring that the new proposals that come forward are electrified to minimize the emissions. That we're able to say with a straight face that this is the lowest carbon LNG in the world, so that when we go to Japan and Korea and they say we're trying to drive down emissions, we would prefer to buy BC LNG because it's lower emission. Then we can say to ourselves, okay, we're displacing LNG from other sites. So when Trump says we're going to build as fast as possible an LNG plant in Alaska with minimal environmental oversight and all these other pieces, instead we can say, we've done this project, it's an Indigenous project, it's lifting people out of poverty, it's creating opportunity for Canadians, it's lower carbon than the competitors, and it's servicing those markets, and we can be proud of that. So that's what we're trying to achieve on LNG, on mining, our opportunities in the Northwest. We're driving a big transmission line up there driven by clean electricity, so they're the lowest carbon metals in the world. It's in partnership with the Tahltan First Nation, and it has a huge land preservation aspect to preserve wild spaces. This is what we're talking about. Not having to choose between our values of protecting the environment and wild spaces and addressing climate change, but being able to, with a straight face as Canadians, say, we're doing it the right way and we're responding to these threats. And this is something that everybody can and should be able to support.
Since you mentioned climate change, nobody talks about it anymore, anywhere. The political energy seems to have disappeared completely from the climate.
I'm definitely in Ontario right now.
From the climate change. I'm talking.
But where am I? Oh yeah. Right.
I'm talking about all over the world. And frankly, your government canceled its own carbon tax, right? Because the politics of it just became untenable, right? So what's going to happen with that issue? I mean, people don't want us governments to be spending any money on it or causing them to spend any money on it. Are we just going to forget about this thing now? Or what is the new government approach to dealing with climate change?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know about everybody else's experiences over the last few years in terms of the impacts of climate change, but it is super real in BC, and we are talking about it. The forest fires, it kind of started with the pine beetle in British Columbia, and then the forest fires and the ocean acidification and the threatening the shellfish aquaculture industry. It's super real out west, and we've seen it moving east. And so for us, it's about where is the path to address two things. One is affordability for people. They're anxious, we need to put food on the table, rent's too high, costs are driving me and my family over the edge. And yeah, we are anxious about climate change. And so finding that combination of policies and initiatives that are going to let us address climate change and move us forward in that direction, while not telling people it has to come at the expense of your food bill and your daily costs and so on. It's not easy, and the path is not obvious, but it's essential that we do it. The focus has been on major industrial emitters in the province. And the carbon tax, without question, for people became about an affordability issue for them. And we didn't want people to have to choose between affordability for themselves and their families and climate action. That is a conservative idea that we don't agree with. We think we can do climate action, we can grow our economy, and we can provide prosperity for Canadians, and we can deliver that. But it does require some out-of-the-box thinking and some work with partners, including internationally.
Right. Are we going to have to spend more on adaptation? Because it feels like it's coming.
Yeah, we had incredible floods in the Sumas Prairie, which along Highway 1, we're told it was a 1 in a 100-year kind of flooding event. We had the 3 of our 4 worst forest fire seasons have happened in the last 4 years. The costs, we have our wildfire service now year-round instead of just seasonal. We have a school that teaches best practice in wildfire. So yes, adaptation will be required. Technology will be required around carbon capture. Shift will be required around how we power our economy and how we develop our resources. And we're fully engaged in that in BC. We have a generational call for energy right now, clean energy. While they're chasing wind developers out of the United States and Alberta, we're welcoming them into British Columbia. We see a huge opportunity around growing our economy and addressing carbon. And we're going to keep pushing in that direction because I think climate change is an inescapable reality, and countries and businesses will come back to it, even if it is not something that the Trump administration wants to hear about.
For the past few months, our sponsor, Fidelity Investments Canada, has been sharing a wealth of investment insights with the Herle Burly community. Insights about older Canadians and how much professional advice matters for those of us preparing for retirement. About younger Canadians, how they're more engaged with their finances than we think, and why investment literacy matters for their long-term success. And about all Canadians, how we care deeply about meeting our financial goals and getting strong returns. Whatever the insight, Fidelity hopes that you got something out of this series and that it motivated you to think about your own financial journey. But if you haven't thought about your finances at all because you're just too damn focused on the meat of our pods, that would be the whip-smart political insights laced with questionably witty banter, Fidelity wants to share this one more time. When it comes to your investments and achieving your goals, performance matters. For nearly 4 decades in Canada, Fidelity's been hard at work, aiming to deliver investment performance its clients and retail investors can count on. So, to over 2 million Canadians, pension fund personnel, employers, and financial advisors who put their trust in them for their financial futures, Fidelity thanks you for your confidence and loyalty. And they thank all of you Herle Burly-ites for your time and attention. So I know you're getting asked this everywhere, so I'm going to try to ask it just a little bit differently, which is in this major projects world, there's a lot of talk out of Alberta about an oil pipeline. And it is being framed by some people as a national unity question. The Premier of Alberta seems to be almost holding a sovereignty, a separation referendum in her back pocket in case Canada doesn't respond well enough to this. Now, I know at the moment that there is no private sector proponent for an oil pipeline. I know that nobody's proposing to build one, and it's arguable whether there's one that is necessary right now. But looking into the future, one can see a situation where you're jammed, where the country's looking to BC to see, are they going to allow a pipeline? It brings into issues like the tanker ban, it brings in issues like port expansion, all of which are hugely controversial, difficult issues in British Columbia. You're trying to manage a coalition in British Columbia of Indigenous people and others to do what you're doing, but I can see how in the future you could get jammed, and it could be, are you going to allow a pipeline to be built? So when you think about that, do you have any principles or bottom lines, or what would have to be preconditions for something like that to happen?
Yeah, I think, for me, David, some of the frustration of politics, and this is actually a bit of a weakness of mine in politics, is I want to talk about what's actually happening and what the conditions on the ground are. And sometimes in politics and its nature of social media, and it's the nature of conversations in media on occasion, and other people want to have conversations about kind of more about ideology and purity tests. And so what's really happening right now, and you mentioned it, is that there is no pipeline project, there's no proponent. The only way that pipeline across the north gets built is if the government of Alberta and the federal government pony up tens of billions of tax dollars to build it. And if that is the case, that they want to do that, then a couple things have to happen. One is the opportunity cost has to be identified. If we have 60 billion, which is a generous estimate about the cost of that pipeline, if we have $60 billion to spend on a publicly funded pipeline across the north, what else could that money go to, and what would we get in return? Well, I can tell you that for a 20th of that money, maybe less, every single major project worth north of $50 billion in British Columbia would advance overnight. And so when we're talking about economic growth and what's going to drive things in the country, that's a pretty significant opportunity cost. But the second piece is we rely on coastal First Nations and the support of coastal First Nations for a lot of these projects, for the LNG projects, for major projects out of the Port of Prince Rupert. For them, and understandably, getting rid of the moratorium on oil tankers off the North Coast is a red line. And it is a red line to the point that they have been very clear with myself, and I imagine with federal stakeholders, that crossing it means a lack of support. That support for port expansion in Rupert and for the LNG projects will evaporate overnight. And those are real projects with real proponents that are actually happening. And so it does make me a little crazy that real projects are being put in jeopardy for shadow boxing about a non-existent project coming out of Alberta. With all of that said, I understand as best I can that Danielle Smith is a politician in Alberta. She is advocating as best as she sees fit for her constituents in Alberta, and I understand that is her priority. She is an amazing advocate because nobody seems to know how little this project actually exists. But I will say that we understand that her province has huge contributions to make to Canada. They make huge contributions to Canada. We have an obligation to work with Alberta on a number of projects. We're working on electrification. We're working with them on the existing taxpayer-owned pipeline, the one that we already own, to make sure that it's used to capacity, and we'll continue to work with Alberta. But I do really have to put my foot down and say, enough. Until you have a real project, please stop. You are jeopardizing actual real projects in British Columbia for no reason except for partisan culture war purposes, and it is a bit much.
Okay, so Prime Minister put out 10 projects, 5 short-term, 5 a little bit more medium-term. Pipeline wasn't on that list, and Danielle Smith did not come out and light her hair on fire and burn the place down. Does that make you suspicious?
I was curiouser and curiouser. I was watching, and I was pleasantly surprised by her sort of Team Canada reaction to it, and I'm glad for it because I think we've got a ton of work to do together, and we can really support each other. Alberta is our major trading partner in Canada. It's just one example. Alberta's had major challenges with their electrical market, leading to really high costs for Albertans, and inconsistent power availability and so on. And we can interconnect with our grid and provide that stability for them. And so those are the kinds of pieces we can work on together if we're not fighting about the non-existent pipeline.
The following is a political advertisement. To build a strong Canadian economy, we need a Made in Canada plan. Public service workers power our economy. They support small businesses and keep our supply chain moving. Canada's economic resilience relies on having strong public services. To strengthen our economy, we need to invest in public services. Learn how at foryoucanada.ca. This message was paid for by the Public Service Alliance of Canada.
Canada is going to need more capacity on the West Coast port-wise, though, are we not? So is it Vancouver or Rupert or what?
Sorry, more capacity on the West Coast for what?
Ports.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to need more
all
port
of the
capacity.
Above, actually. We have a port in Stewart, which is a tiny little community up in the northwest that we think is going to be a significant export port for metals and minerals out of the northwest in this project that we're working on. That I told you about earlier with all the mines and the conservation area and electrification, all that. We have the Port of Prince Rupert is seeing really significant expansion and is going to continue to see that. The products that come in there go all the way through to Chicago. And so it might seem counterintuitive, but from all the way up in Northwest BC, it goes all the way through. And the Port of Vancouver is the site of two competing expansion proposals. One is the Global Containers proposal to expand, that's a private sector proposal to expand container space. And then the other one is Roberts Bank 2, which is a Port of Vancouver proposal to build essentially an artificial island and dramatically increase port capacity.
Because it's super crowded there right now, is it not? Like, my understanding is it'd be really difficult to get more boats into that area.
The big
I think they're
threat
called ships,
that we've been underlining for the feds is not ship traffic, it's car traffic and truck traffic. So for all of these port proposals in the Lower Mainland, one of the reasons why Vancouver's port is one of the lowest productivity ports in the world is because of these bottlenecks for trucks coming into the port. And so we've been encouraging them, like, just do a tabletop exercise, identify the bottlenecks, work with us on getting those addressed so that the trucks can move in and out. And it's a winner politically, too, because it supports people getting around to work and so on more efficiently.
All right. Okay. So we're talking about all these energy-related projects, but I've had economists, and mineral mining-related projects, but I've had economists tell me that the biggest hit to the Canadian economy from Trump's tariffs is lumber. And that must be an enormous factor in British Columbia. So what's happening in the lumber industry?
Yeah, it's tough. Our lumber sector was under strain already.
And just to be clear, by the way, because in case people don't know, employs way more people than cars, than auto does, or that almost any of the major industries in Canada does. Lumber is a massive employer.
It's a massive employer across the country, and certainly in British Columbia. It contributes, when things are good, in excess of $1 billion annually to our provincial coffers and so on. And there are whole towns built around mills that are dependent, families dependent, making the rent on the fact that the mill's running on a full shift capacity. So the sector was under stress. There was the pine beetle that I talked about. Government opened up all the forests for logging to address the pine beetle. Then there was the wildfire that sucked up a whole bunch of wood. Our government said no more mowing down old growth forest. Which was going to end at a certain point anyway. We moved that date forward. And so when you put those factors together, some intentional, some horrific natural events related to climate change, and that things were tough. And we were working with the sector, we are working with the sector on addressing those issues. But what is really hard to deal with is we've had a near doubling of the duties on softwood lumber going into the States already through existing mechanisms under Trump. There's a national security investigation into our lumber as a major threat to the United States, which will enable the president to put additional tariffs on, allegedly. We don't accept that, but that is what we're being told. Lumber is already at a very low price in the United States. Housing starts in Texas are down double digits, for example. That's a significant market for wood for us. Building homes in the United States. And so when you put all these pieces together, it is a very bleak situation. The glimmer of hope, and what I've been advocating for with the feds, is there's $8 billion in a bank account that has been collected in duties from our forestry companies that's sitting and being held pending the outcome of our dispute between Canada and the US on the duties. That money, combined with a willingness of producers in British Columbia and New Brunswick and other key producers to talk about a quota on the amount of BC wood that goes to the United States, are two pieces that could form the basis of an agreement on softwood lumber. And we're really pushing the feds to try to advance that conversation. You know, the president can take a big win. Here's $8 billion. Hopefully it could be used to grow the market for everybody. The producers could be happy they get the quota they've been advocating for many years. And for Canadians and Canadian companies, stability while we build out access to international markets in partnership with the feds. You know, our forest minister is here in the front row, Ravi Parmar. He's been saying, look, if we can just work together and we can get to 15, 20% of our market to go overseas, something that we should have done a long time ago with the feds, then we're going to be in a much better place. And so So hopefully that's the direction.
Are there
that
some
things
other
go,
markets that you're optimistic about?
Yeah, we were out in Japan and Korea. These are big markets for us, but they're very specific markets about a particular kind of wood. They're huge markets. India has been historically a large market for us. It could be even bigger. There are big opportunities for us globally, but some of it is about education about Canadian wood products and outreach directly. Like, it's very labor intensive to build those markets, but once they're built, they start to grow on themselves. So that's why we have this organization within government that's working with the federal government around promoting our lumber products around the world.
Cool. All right, you also have your finance minister here.
Yes.
And you're not allowed to dump this question on her, right? Okay. Which is, we are hearing from various jurisdictions about deficits that were unexpectedly large. So we're hearing that the federal deficit, despite what we're told will be austerity on operating expenses, right, could be a number we're not used to hearing, 70, 80, 90 billion dollars. There was a report that came out in Ontario the other day about how they are on no track to balance their budget in any way, shape, or form. Deficit's going to be out there as far as the eye can see. And then there was a report in British Columbia about deficits being significantly larger than had been anticipated. Is this sustainable?
Well, the short answer is no. We have to turn it around, and we will. We're committed to do that. The longer answer is that we have a couple of avenues that are available to us. One is we can increase taxes. One is we can cut services for people. The commitment we've made to British Columbians is we can turn this around without cutting frontline services. And we're going to do it without raising taxes on British Columbians. What we're going to do is, and there's opportunity for us to do this, we can reduce administration costs within government. We can be more efficient in government while delivering, we think, even better frontline services. Productivity improvements in the private sector have missed government entirely in some areas, and so we think we can deliver better services more efficiently. And some of it's around healthcare. We have a significant growth in our health authorities and administration and VPs and other costs. I think a number of provinces are grappling with those health administration costs as we try to direct that money to the front line. So that's that part, but it's not enough money. That work is not enough. The sustainability around an aging population, healthcare costs, a growing population, and good schools for kids, being able to respond in the way that we want to as New Democrats to issues of poverty and housing and so on, requires that we are growing our economy, that we're creating prosperity, that we're driving these major projects, and that is exactly where we're going. So, it's just one example. The Highland Valley Copper Mine expansion announcement that I was at a week and a half ago, it's 1,900 sustainable jobs for the community. It's 2,900 jobs during construction. It's a multi-billion-dollar construction project, and it's a multi-billion-dollar year-over-year operating revenue project for provincial government. I mean, that is one mine, and we have 11 in the Northwest, and I think we have about 15 across the province. And so it's only by leveraging these projects, getting them across the line, supporting clean energy, ensuring that we're delivering on that front, that we're going to be able to meet the demands of the population. There's just really no other avenue.
Right. You would have had some insider look at this whole major projects. So that, by the way, doesn't sound like you think that's going to come down really quickly. Because it's really contingent upon building a new economy in British Columbia that generates more revenue. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's not going to be next year.
No, we have to show year-over-year declining deficits. That's just non-negotiable. And we're going to do that. That's a requirement. We don't want to spend more money on interest than is absolutely required. And part of that means showing a path back to balance for the people who are lending us money. But also, one of the unique situations that British Columbia faces when we look across the country is we have one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios of any of the provinces in Canada, and so we do have some time to turn around, but not a lot, and so it's got to be very focused work.
Yeah. And you have a strike going on with government workers right now.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
And they want annual increases of around 4%?
That's part of the ask, as well as a number of reclassifications that brings the total to about 15%.
Okay, well, I didn't know about that, but so, like, when I heard 4% annually, like the polling I do indicates that there is actually a massive cost of living crisis out there, that people are really, and well up the income scale, right, feeling like they can't afford the life they used to afford. In fact, my polling is showing an alarming increase in things like food insecurity in the country. So, given what we've been through in terms of inflation, et cetera, 4% doesn't feel to me like an unreasonable ask.
No, and I think it's important as a new Democratic government, to be pretty clear about where we're at. And so in the last agreement we reached with the government workers, it was an 18% increase that was in excess of inflation that we saw during that period of dramatic inflation. That was a significant agreement when we had space to be able to do that. But ultimately, in the situation that we're in right now, we're not in a position to be able to do that. And so we're keen to sit down at the table and reach those kind of creative solutions and find paths to address workers who may have been left behind, or they're facing below average wages or whatever. We're keen about that. But each percentage raise amounts to about $400 million. And so when we're looking at a deficit that is threatening to be, and we're not going to end up here, but it's threatening to be north of $11 billion, that is a significant amount, and that is not a position where we're able to say, oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. You know, we have to sit down, we have to be creative and find those wins, and that's what we're hopeful to do.
Right. Conscious of the time, I've got so many things I want to touch on with you, and I guess one of them is the federal government calls itself a new federal government, and I'm interested in your take on how new it is and how different it is from what came before, and in particular, on this major projects thing, you know, the list was criticized for being things that were already well advanced in and of themselves. So there's maybe a sense among some parts in the country that the speed of movement that the Prime Minister talked about is not actually happening, and that it's the whole thing has become bogged down. Is that, can you correct me on that? Is there a lot happening on this, and are things moving at speeds we've never moved before in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to speak ill of the dead, but
it's a good opener.
There has been a real shift in our conversations with the federal government. I think the new Prime Minister, I think he's actually doing a great job. I will give him grief. He and his team have not adequately addressed inequalities and imbalances in federal programs with respect to British Columbia compared with the rest of the country.
You're not going to bring up ferries. Like, I wasn't sure I was going to bring up ferries. I can't believe you're going to bring up ferries.
I will bring it up. If you ride on a ferry in Eastern Canada, you are subsidized to the tune of $300 federal. If you ride on a ferry in British Columbia, you are subsidized to the tune of $1 federal.
Yeah, but why should we subsidize those Chinese ferries?
Because you bought a whole ferry for Eastern Canada from the same shipyard, David. So we helped buy a whole ferry for Eastern Canada from that same shipyard, David. So anyway, I think the Prime Minister is doing a great job out of the gate. They're huge. He has huge challenges. There are massive expectations. There are people are really expecting him to work a lot of magic. And that's going to be a very difficult thing for him and for the federal government going forward. But in terms of a couple things, one is just absolute clarity that we are going to build this country up. We're going to stand on our own 2 feet. No uncertainty about where the government stands on this, and that we're going to do it and we mean it. I'm grateful for that. We have ambiguity in our own province about, from the Conservatives, about whether or not we should be bowing down to the states and trying and sort of saying, you know, whatever you say, President Trump. That ambiguity, there is none of that here. There is the ability of the Prime Minister to just talk about the thing that you're talking about, and he knows what you're talking about, and you can have a conversation and it doesn't feel like you're being managed, but you're actually engaging and trying to find a path that is significant and very welcome. And I can tell that his team, the cabinet members, have received direction to engage and to find the path forward and so on, and it is a different vibe. So it will take time to translate, and there will be frustrations that I will have with this government, but I am glad that they're pointing the direction that they are.
Okay. Good. You mentioned the Conservative opposition in BC, and I thought maybe listeners and people here in the audience might be interested in hearing you talk a little bit about who would replace you if you were to lose, because it's changed a lot out there in recent years, and maybe people aren't fully conversant with what's gone on. The BC Liberal Party is dead and gone, and has been replaced by a Conservative Party that's pretty nascent, and seems to be less interested in the center of BC politics than in driving a Conservative agenda. This new party, what's it like? What are they about? What would they do differently than you?
Okay.
I know it.
Thanks. Thanks for the question, David.
I got to let you be a politician a little bit.
That's great. So one of the lines that New Democrats used to say for a long time, especially in Ontario, was like, I know they're called the BC Liberals, but they're not actually Liberals. They are a Conservative party. And we really, when we said that, we
leavened with some Liberals.
We truly believe that.
Leavened with some Liberals.
Well, we truly believe that, but I, on reflection, realized that was not totally correct. This is a very right-wing Conservative party that we have now in the province. They're certainly appropriately named, and they may, and many of their members are further right, I suspect, of a number of the federal Conservatives. There is a strong anti-vax cohort. There is a strong anti-science, anti-climate change, anti-LGBT, anti-immigrant, and that's unfair. That member left and formed her own party and is issuing press releases about mass migration. And it is a chaotic pastiche of far-right issues that they can't hold themselves together. Right now they're tearing themselves apart about a membership scandal where there were a bunch of allegedly fake memberships that were created. And right now we are polling neck in neck. So I think that for us...
It's not a good time to be an incumbent. It's difficult out there.
I mean, this is the part that is a continual message to me and to all of my colleagues, is the other side can be a mess. They can be terrifying in different ways to different parts of the province. And if people just want change and they don't feel you're addressing their issues, then you're going to be in trouble. And it doesn't matter who it is. And so that is a driving force for us to stay connected. We've been in government for a while. It's easy to get disconnected and just you listen to, you've got your deputy and you've got people who are telling you you're doing a great job, and you've got this lobbyist over here who says, you guys have the momentum of a runaway freight train, and then all of a sudden it's like you're on election night and you win by 16 votes. True story. And so, those are the moments when it's like, whew, okay. We got to stay focused on people. We got to stay focused on affordability. The healthcare system has to work. People need to see a path out of being stuck in traffic. They need the downtown not to be a mess of people struggling with addiction, mental health issues. We got to stay focused on these issues, and we got to ensure that we're doing the work to grow the economy. And it's moments like those and reminders like those that are really key.
Okay, I want to take you wildly off the subject now, but it's because I think you'll be very thoughtful on this. In part because of your history before you were in politics of working on civil rights and civil liberties, right? So I look at the United States right now, and ABC canceled Jimmy Kimmel yesterday for something that he said about Charlie Kirk, and we see media organizations cowed by the administration if they say things the administration doesn't like. We see law firms cowed by the administration. We see universities, major academic institutions, right, dancing to the administration's tune. All of it geared to, there is correct things to say and believe, and there are incorrect things to say and believe. That's not a liberal democracy down there anymore, is it?
So I think by any measure, there are a number of trends in the United States that are incredibly alarming and should be alarming to Canadians. And the question is, for us here, where does that take us as a country? What is our response to be in this moment? I think there are a lot of people in the United States that are as alarmed as Canadians are, that are working to organize and they're working to respond to it, and I wish them the best of luck. We have so many American friends and colleagues and relatives and you name it, and we know this isn't who the United States, in my opinion, this isn't who the United States truly is. It is the impact of a single individual in the White House. And so as Canadians, what is our response to be? One is to not adopt what's happening in the US in our own country, to react, in my opinion, in a way that is the reverse of it, to be welcoming to the world, to be concerned about and acting on climate change, to be embracing safeguards and not to peddle conspiracies about elections and election fraud. We are awash in American social media to not adopt the divisiveness of politics that's come from the United States. And it's difficult because you can see people trying it in different ways in Canada, see, will this land, will this land, will this land? And if you push back against it, then maybe you're accused of being divisive in a different way. But I really think that all parties need to look at it and reject it and find our own path forward as Canadians, and I think we can. And so that's, it's too big, it's too incomprehensible. I can pretend to understand what's happening in the United States. I have no idea. I read in the paper. Who knows? So that's for Americans to figure out what I can affect as a Canadian, and what I understand is British Columbia and where we're going and what we can do. And we want to build a strong alternative for people that shows success and prosperity and protects human rights and values people and is open to the world and addresses climate change and the alternative is, if we don't do that, that I do fear that we could go a very similar route, and I take the weight of that in our decisions as government as well.
Right. One of the things we haven't talked about, though, is, over the years of Trump, going back to 2016, people have talked about what's driving this, and I think people have landed on a bunch of different theories, but certainly at the core of it, there is economic displacement. There are people that are just angry. Right, whether it's young people who don't feel like they've got the opportunities, or manufacturing people who lost their jobs 25, 30 years ago and have been working in the service industry ever since there was a market for what Trump was selling. Is there not a similar market economically emerging in Canada?
Well, I think the market is for somebody that people believe is going to challenge the system that's causing them not to be able to afford groceries, that's going to help deliver more affordable rents for them and address concerns they have about public safety in their community. And if the only option is somebody who says, I'm going to round everybody up and put them all in jail, and I'm going to, we're just going to burn as much gas as possible, or whatever the thing is that feels the opposite of what's happening right now, then people are going to vote for it. They're going to say, yeah, okay, man, let's give it a shot. Let's see how it goes, because this isn't working for me and my family. And I'm willing to put up with a certain amount of nonsense in order to be able to see some meaningful change in my life. And so that is the imperative for center left, for progressive parties, for politicians, is we have to be a credible alternative that actually makes a difference in people's lived experience in the community. It is not enough to scold people about improper conduct. It is not enough to be performative. We have to actually demonstrate in a lived reality way that their lives are better because of our actions. And if we are unable to do that, then we will be unsuccessful at the end of the day in resisting proposals that come that are historically quite unpopular, and rightly so, in our country.
Right, the onus really is on the progressive side of the equation a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that is where the alternate vision and delivery is going to come from. Okay. Absolutely. Okay.
All right, we're at the end, so let's just swing this right around back to the beginning, where this started from. And you have a message for Canada about British Columbia and its economy, and it's a little bit of a new one, and it's much more growth-oriented. So sum it up for us. What do you want people to understand about British Columbia? What's going to happen there over the next couple of years?
What you're going to see from our province and what I hope we're supported in doing with the federal government is developing our economy, supporting the development of the Canadian economy in a way that is Canadian-centric, is a vision of sovereignty, both for our province and for the country, that is different than we've seen in many generations in our country. It's one that is a vision of Canadians standing on our own feet, being a strong and forceful presence in the world that is advocating for the values that we all feel as Canadians are critical, looking after people who are struggling, making sure that we're protecting things for future generations and that we're responsibly developing our resources, delivering high-quality public health care and public services. You know, those components, that British Columbia is the engine that drives through our economic development, that kind of a country. That we're going to do our part, and that we're going to support all the provinces and the territories in delivering that vision that our kids deserve and their kids deserve as well. This is an inflection point for our country. I firmly believe that. I believe that the Prime Minister understands that. I think my colleagues across the country understand that, and we're going to help drive it from British Columbia.
Awesome. It's a very, very positive, very galvanizing vision. So thanks. It's great to hear it. Thank you for joining the Canadian Club and the Herle Burly. And thank you to all the sponsors who put this together, but a real special thank you for you coming here and explaining what's going on out there to all of us. It's great to see you.
I appreciate it, David. Thanks very much. And thanks to the Canadian Club for organizing and really made it possible, all the staff here.